And away we go. Hi, hello, hello YouTube and Facebook and all of the social medias. Um, my guest for this dialogue is someone I've always appreciated their work to reunite astronomy and astrology, and that's Kim Nosworthy-Lovelace,
Glad to have you.
Rostar. Yes, yes. Rustar13.org. And I just want to invite you to introduce yourself again.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'll start with, I came into 13 star sign astrology about 10 years ago. And but I've known about the sign of Ophiuchus since I was around 16 years old, because it came out on the media that there was this 13th star sign. But you could never find any more information about it, but it always stuck in my mind because I thought, oh, that falls around about my birthday, you know. Anyway, and I grew up around astrology. My grandparents were both mediums. My grandfather was also an astrologer. So I grew up in an environment understanding astrology, understanding like the ethereal realms and stuff like that. And I worked as a psychic reader for like 30, 40 years, just before I came into astrology. So, when I first came into the 13 star sign astrology, I was working with the Prometheus Capricorn system, which is fantastic. It's a really lovely system, and it's got so much in there, like all the asteroids, and it's quite a fascinating system to work with. And we originally worked with a 12 house system. And then, I wanted to get more astronomical with my astrology. So my partner, Eric, who the siderealist, I think many of you would know him out there, he actually helped me design a chart wheel, which AstroApp developed for me. So, I have a chart wheel now in AstroApp that actually matches the true lifetime sky. That's why I call it True Lifetime Sky Astrology. But anyway, I also, around about the time I heard about Ophiuchus, a few years later, I actually learned about Lilith, the story of Lilith. And of course, the story I learned at that time was the demonic Lilith, the one that
Mhm,
eats babies and
mhm,
seduces men in their sleep.
mhm,
And, I learned this from actually my English teacher, because I left school when I was 14. So I was doing a writer's course at the time. And I thought, right, I need to get my English GCSE because, I need to brush up on my grammar, etc. So I joined this English class, this evening English class, and it turned out that my teacher was also a white witch. And he told me about the story of Lilith. So that's how I was introduced to her. But I felt quite fascinated with her. And I felt this connection and this resonance with her. And I thought, no, there's another story here to be told, because
mhm,
this succubus demonic Lilith, I just felt, because I'm not really, I believe personally, demons are man-made. I believe, that
mhm,
Saturn has been demonized. I believe Pluto has been demonized. And definitely the Black Moon Lilith has been demonized.
mhm,
And I thought, there's stories there to be told. So I've done a lot of research over the years. I mean, and before the internet was formed, obviously I had to rely on books. So I was buying loads of books and doing a lot of research from books. And then when the internet came about, it was a fantastic tool. And I'm not one to read a book or a paragraph or an article and take it all on board. I will take out the bits I resonate with and add them to my little jigsaw puzzle that I've been building for many, many years.
mhm,
And it was after Eric died, actually, I started to get all these downloads coming through. And I was already aware of who the Black Moon Lilith was. And I was also aware of who Ophiuchus was.
mhm,
So when all this information started to come through, it all started to form this picture and all started to make a lot of sense. So we'll start with the Black Moon Lilith. Now the Black
you've always had a connection to there was like, what would you say is what got you into astrology? This pull from
Moon,
Lilith and Ophiuchus?
I actually, you know, even though my grandfather was an astrologer and I grew up around astrology, I mean, I did practice 12 sign astrology.
Oh yeah.
Back in the late 90s, I was editing the Spiritual magazine,
Oh
and I
yeah.
was also working, doing astrology for a local history website at the time. It was someone I met on a business course.
Oh, cool.
Just could not resonate with the 12 signs because I think in the back of my mind, I was always aware there was another star sign.
Mhm.
But, you know, I could never find any information. But it was
Yeah,
in that
yeah.
time that I started to study about asteroids and
Right.
stuff like
Yeah,
that.
it got you thinking outside the
Yeah,
box, the conventional box. I have a similar bit in that I had been into astrology a while, like some decades, but I would never read charts or see people until I had discovered like astronomical astrology, constellational, which I discovered through Capricorn Prometheus and Athenchementes' work, and just started to use that midpoints, which I've adapted since. But when I encountered that, and it was from my first experience with my own chart, it was just like, and it was just, I mean, I wish I could bottle that and, you know, give it away, just share it with people, that feeling of like, whoa, that makes sense. And then from that point, I was able to enter into like service to others around astrology too, which so pretty similar in that regard. It wasn't the mythology of Ophiuchus and Lilith that drew me, but that's what you wanted to talk about today specifically. When I reached out to you and said, "Oh, please, you know, be this dialogue guest," and what would you like to speak about? You said Ophiuchus and Lilith, and I was delighted because I love. I'm not so into the demonized Lilith. The whole modern mythology of, you know, mother of vampires that we get is very limited and overly dark and just not sufficient. But then when you told me that you were going to introduce some material from your from your experience with like channeling or mediumship, just some material that maybe might be new to people. I was very, very excited. And in fact, I haven't said anything to promote this except like, oh, I think it's going to be really, really vivid, really juicy. But I want to I want to take this moment just to remind people that we've left the box behind. Like if we looked behind us, we probably wouldn't even see the box. We're out there, and you may hear some things in the course of this, you know, dialogue that you can't confirm in Bullfinch's mythology. And I want to invite you to burn Bullfinch's mythology and and express something more worthwhile. Let mythology evolve and be a fluid thing. Let it be open. Let it be unfixed, just for this little bit of time. And I just want to hold that space for you, Kim, and I want to invite everybody at this point to really just kind of like throw the map away again. Let's enter into a space of really non-judgmental listening, some deep listening, and yeah, I'm so curious, really, what you have to say on Lilith and Ophiuchus from your own from your own side, your own experience. So thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me, honestly. And, you know, there's been quite a few people that have said they're really interested in what I've got to say. And, you know, because when I do my videos, I do bits and pieces out about the mythology from my own understanding. So I've had quite a lot of people reach out and say to me, oh, Kim, I want to know more about this. Or can you do classes on this? And but I think the best way really for me to really put the whole story out is in book form, which I really need to, you know, get on with. But in the meantime, I do put bits and pieces out because it's like a preparation. So doing this video today is really a preparation. I don't have proof of what I'm saying, but I think if, you know, I think many of us, it's like if it resonates with your soul, if it makes sense to you, then you're absorbing that information, you know.
Right, right.
And you know,
I think of that, if I may, I think of that as not, is this true or not? I suspend that question, but I think, is this useful or not? You know.
and I think, you know, from my understanding, it's a lot more simplified and a lot more kind of like real to life, really, if you know what I mean, because all these demonized versions, and it's very kind of like the language around mythology, it's very, you know, what would you call it, like a riddle, or it's very poetic, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It's mythological in a lot of in a lot of ways, in that it's metaphorical, and the meaning is to us like presented in these fractal archetypes of story, you know, laden with symbolism, and the whole relationship with the stars is sort of like that, whether we like the stories or not. It's always been that way, right? Through all cultures, we have invented stories about these characters that we've seen. So,
Well, a lot of it also goes back to Sumerian writings and the Egyptian writings, but you've got to understand they're writing from their own point of view, because a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about doesn't actually come from Sumerian Egypt originally. It comes from, you know, like I spoke to you about before, the land of Lemuria, where, you know, well, let's not get into that right now, because we need to start really from who the earth really was beforehand,
sure,
before we
sure.
came there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of controversy around Tiamat. And I read today someone's version of Tiamat of what they've learned. But Tiamat was actually former earth in the time of when the serpents and the dragons actually lived upon Tiamat on the earth. And so the earth wasn't, it wasn't, there was no humans on earth at the time. It was serpents and dragons and different kinds of creatures down here. The earth was very like bogland. It was full of peat. And the solar system itself was very tight, was much closer together, because the sun was still in its youth. So the sun wasn't as big as it is today. So the magnetic, you know, the spiral energy, which actually separates the planets, you know, was a lot tighter. So above Tiamat, we had like Uranus and Neptune was closer to Tiamat, and Saturn was actually closer to another planet that used to exist in our solar system called Maldek. Now, Maldek was a lot further advanced technologically, and but they used to come down to Tiamat to mine for peat and opals. So Neptune and Uranus actually produce opals, and Uranus used to burst its banks on Tiamat like every so many hundreds or thousands of years. It was a regular occurrence. That's why Tiamat was full of peat and opals and stuff like that. So the serpent beings that actually lived here, you know, they had opals embedded into their skin, because when they used to bathe in the rivers, like, it used to get into their skin. And it's not to say they were not intelligent beings, because they were very intelligent beings, but they lived the simple, natural life. You know, they were very They were healers. They were the magicians, you know. They were very magical and had a lot of knowledge around alchemy and herbs and you know, the Tiamat was full of all healing products and different types of animals as well. So the serpents and the dragons were the males, the serpents were the females. And but the male decans used to come down. Now this is where Anu comes in, the male, you know, the Sumerian Anu.
Yeah.
And he used to come down with his team of guys or team of soldiers, whatever they were. But you know, they had a pact with the serpent people. You know, that the serpents were quite happy for them to come down and mine for peat, you know, because Tiamat was abundant with all natural resources. And I think Maldek needed these resources for their own planet. You know, their planet was very built up. They was actually in their golden age. Now, you know, we've all heard of the shining ones, you know, in the biblical texts and in mythological texts, we've all heard of the shining ones. Well, when they used to come down from Maldek, if you look at the pictures or the images in the Egyptian art, even Sumerian art, they've got earrings, they've got watches, you know, they were full of bling. You know, they were because Saturn produces diamonds. So they were abundant with like diamonds. That's where they got the chips from. They had computer technology, they had everything. And so when they come down, they was like full of bling, you know, like diamonds and hair, all perfectly done, little man bags, everything. You know, if you look at the images, that's what you're seeing there.
Sure.
But you know, Anu actually represents Saturn in astrology. Now, when he used to come down, I mean, he was the king of Maldek. But when he used to come down, he found a lot of peace on Tiamat. It was very peaceful. And he was at that time in his life where he was looking for different things, like material things he had in abundance. So he was looking for something more. And there was a high priestess, serpent priestess on Tiamat called Nama. Now, Nama, she was beautiful. She had, you know, she was very loving, very, you know, but he got quite fascinated with her. And I think they formed quite a friendship together. And they did actually come together and she got pregnant. Now, the pregnancy with the serpents, they didn't give birth like humans do. They actually laid eggs. So the serpent females used to be out all day doing their alchemy and their healing and gathering herbs and stuff like that, while the dragons used to look after the egg. You know, so the dragons will be out of a nighttime, like guarding and doing their work around the planet. But the serpent females used to be out during the day. So, you know, Anu already had a wife up on Maldek. And when she found out that this, you know, the serpents were classed as lower class people because they lived such a simple life, and because the Maldekans were so materialistic, they actually looked down on the serpent people like lower class people. So for the king of Maldek to get a serpent woman pregnant, it was like horrendous. Do you know what I mean? But it started a trend because like everyone wanted to be like the king. They wanted to be like Anu. You know, he had a lot of followers that, you know, really looked up to him and admired him. So that's how, you know, the Maldekans used to come down and they started to mate with the serpents and the dragons, etc. But anyway, that's how the golden egg was Ophiuchus, was Osiris. He was the first human. So he represents Adam, he represents Osiris, he represents Enki in the Sumerian text. So, you know, Isis said, there's a statement made by Isis in mythology that says, I have been known by many names. And I think just like we have aliases today, I think they did back then. I think every time they got into, you know, a different role in life, they would adopt a different name. So they had many names. So with Anu, I mean, he was just the king of Maldek. He was just known as Anu. So Anunnaki, he was from the Anunnaki race. But I say race, I hate that word race, but well, you
Yeah, such a recent idea, but yeah, unfortunate how it's come to be today. Yeah, yes, species, kind, they're kind. I think we could, yeah.
yeah. So Osiris, you know, he was the first human to be born from two different beings.
Hmm.
So, you know, the wife up on Maldek, I can't remember her name. I need to research her name a bit more, but she had a child after, not long after, and that was Enlil, the Sumerian Enlil. So they were half brothers, but
And that
obviously
and that
he,
child and that child that she had was with one of the or one of the dragons, or was
with Anu, her
with
husband, the king
yeah.
of Maldek. Yeah. So he had a child down here on Tiamat, and he had a child up on Maldek as well. But the child on Tiamat was the firstborn. And, you know, it was a thing even then that the firstborn child was, you know, entitled to the throne, etc.
Right.
But yeah, so as these boys were growing up, these two half brothers, there was a lot of resentment coming in from the Maldecan born child towards Osiris, the Egyptian Osiris, or the Sumerian Enki. And, you know, but the Maldecans also used to practice like arranged marriages. So when these two boys were born, they were already signed off into a marriage with other people. You know, it was a like a pact made between the parents. So Isis and Nephthys were twin sisters, but they were both Maldecan. They wasn't from Tiamat, they were Maldecan. And Isis was arranged to get married to Osiris, and Nephthys was arranged to get married to Enlil. And yeah, so they all grew up together because they were encouraged to grow up together. But of course, Enlil was very bitter. His mother was very bitter, so he grew up in that environment of bitterness. Now, in astrology, he would represent Pluto, and obviously Osiris would represent Earth, because it was when he came onto the throne of Tiamat that the name changed to Ea, Earth, and that comes from the Sumerian text. Yeah. So, you know, we're talking about the age of Lemuria. We haven't even like gone into Atlantis, because by the time Atlantis was formed, Osiris had been killed by his brother, and Isis actually took the throne. So she was like the, you know, the queen. The females didn't actually have a right to the throne, but because she was so respected, that's when she became Hatshepsut, and Hatshepsut was the female king. You know, the woman that was dressed as a man. So that's when the feminine side of Ophiuchus comes in. So the original was masculine, and then later came in the feminine that took the throne. And also Lilith. So we're getting to Lilith now. So Nephthys, in her younger years, I mean, the asteroid Lilith would represent her in her younger years. Now, she was very much molded by Enlil, as Isis was by Enki. So sorry, I'm flitting from Sumerian to Egyptian names because I've kind of had channeling come in for both kind of like communities. Do you get what I mean?
Sure. No, thanks for keeping it straight for people
That's
who
why I
might be
need to
like,
write a book
yeah.
so I can lay it all out in a better way, because I'm not very good at verbalizing the whole story, because it's just so intricate
Yeah.
with the different names and the different cultures. But the Black Moon Lilith, so Nephtys, as she was growing up, he was very cold towards her. He's very manipulative, quite spiteful towards her. One minute he'd draw her in and be all nice to her, and the next minute he'd be rejecting her and making her feel like crap, you know. And she grew up with that, and you know, obviously she became his wife. So when Anu got old, he said, right, you know, Osiris will take the throne on Tiamat, and Enlil will take the throne on Maldek to make it fair for the brothers. So as you know, Enlil took the throne of Maldek, he banished his father down to Tiamat. That's how Saturn got banished to Earth. And he was banished and really, but the Maldekans always had more control over Tiamat, because the Tiamatans were peaceful people. They didn't have weapons or anything like that. They lived their life quite simply and peacefully. So the Maldekans always had this like power over them with the technology they had. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so how the story of the Black Moon Lilith comes about. Nephthys, as she grew up and she was married to the king, the great king she was the great queen of Maldek, and she was very well respected, but she lacked love, she lacked compassion, she was very shut down emotionally. So she did use a womanly, you know, she used to seduce men, and it was really an ego thing with her to make herself feel good. Do you know what I mean? But what she did, what Osiris did, Osiris, you can read the Sumerian text and it would tell you that Enki loved his beer, and Osiris, you know, was Enki. So it was in one night when he was drinking, he was quite drunk, that Nephthys actually came in and seduced him, because he believed it was his wife, Isis, in his drunken stupor. He thought it was his wife coming to him, but it was actually her sister. And you know, so that was the stupid thing she done, because what happened was, like, after that she realized she was pregnant, but she obviously knew, was it her husband's or was it his half brothers? Now if it's his half brothers, obviously the baby's going to be different. It could come out looking different, you know. So she went into this deep depression, and she was actually going to kill herself. So she did come down to Tiamat, and she went to this lake that she used to like to go and sit by. And I think she was feeling the baby move inside her at the time, you know, so she knew she was definitely pregnant. But if her husband had found out that she had seduced her sister's husband, even Osiris and Isis wasn't aware of this. So she went to the lake, she was going to drown herself. But as she sort of like sat over the lake, like she was sobbing her heart out, like she didn't really want to die, but she felt it was the only way out, you know. But as she bent over the lake, she saw her image, and she saw the beauty, how beautiful she actually was. And it was at that point the white lily popped up in the lake. And all of a sudden it came to her, no, if I go and talk to my sister and her husband, maybe I can have the baby. And like all this plan started coming forward. It was almost like she started to channel this plan. So
around being honest about the event.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she thought, it's the only solution, it's the only way out. Maybe they can help me in some way. You know, if his child, if it's Osiris's child, then, you know, but she had to go and tell them what she had done. And she was in remorse, because she'd gone through the dark night of the soul. From when she found out she was pregnant, she hit the dark night of the soul, because, you know, the dark night of the soul always takes a trigger point. And, you know, it can be different things for different people. 9 times out of 10, it's like a relationship breakdown, or, you know, you lose everything. Like you might be a big businessman, and all of a sudden you lose everything. And then you go through this dark night of the soul. So she was going through the dark night of the soul, but then you know, she got this plan. No, maybe I need to go and talk to my sister and her husband and tell them and open up and be honest about what I've done, because I feel terrible about what I've done now. I love my sister, you know, I don't hate her. I'm just in a place of wounding, you know. And when she did go and confide in them, they did help her. So this is now the story of Moses.
Oh, yeah.
Because like Lilith, obviously, she became Lilith because when the Lily popped up out of the water, now she's adopted the name Lilith. And in Sumerian, she was known as Inanna. In Egyptian, she was known as Nephtys. So she went and told them, and then they made this plan that they hide her until the baby's born, and then like they adopt the baby, and that's how the baby comes down the stream in the basket. And it just so happens that everyone's there on the platform waiting for the baby, you know. And that was Anubis, the Egyptian Anubis, who's Moses is also known as Noah, because he was the one that led the people out of Lemuria into and the ark wasn't like a boat or anything like that. I think, was it Globeki Tepe? There was many places along the ecliptic, because that's where Lemuria sat all along, not the ecliptic, the equator. Yeah. So Lemuria went from kind of like Australia right over to like Southern America. So it cut all through Africa, the Middle East, you know. So the serpents lived all along that line for some reason, and that was Lemuria. It was after Venus went over as a comet, and a lot of asteroids hit the Earth and caused further floodings and changed the landscape, that it became Earth after that. So yeah, so that's how she became the Black Moon, because obviously her husband Enlil demonized her, hated her. It made him even more bitter than what he already was. So he really demonized her bad, and she had to be in hiding for the rest of her life. But Isis adopted her child and took the child on as their own.
I was going to ask how the Moses that element of adoption came into it. And just, do you think it's helpful to understand this as like pre-diluvial, or like before the last ice age, or anything that relates to any of the timelines that might be like in common use? Should we just think of this as like very, very long ago?
Yeah, this is pre-Ice Age, because I think the Ice Age came after Venus went over. And because Jupiter always sat behind Saturn back then, Jupiter was not in front of Saturn, it was behind Saturn. Venus was a comet that came from Jupiter. And there is this group of scientists, they're called the Thunderbolts Project, I think.
Thunderbolts
Yeah,
project, is that? Oh,
the
yeah, yeah. This electric
Revolutionary
universe.
Universe, yeah, theory.
Yeah,
It's not so much their science, but they've got a mythology section that shows you how Venus was in the sky behind Mars, and Saturn and Jupiter was behind Saturn. And I resonated with that. And that's when the story first started, because it always takes a trigger when you get downloads. There's like a trigger, and then you start getting downloads. Like I said, you know, what I've said here today, it may resonate, it may not. I don't know if I've made myself clear, or if I've put the story across in you know,
I think
a way.
it's clear. I mean, I'm sorry, I have a little understanding of the Sumerian and Egyptian. Just, I don't claim to have understanding in those mysteries, but just the names, the characters, and what you're saying, it draws some very interesting lines that I've actually personally always wondered about. And I think it's clear what you're saying comes through. I wonder, like, what do we do with that? You know, having sort of, you drew a line between Lilith and Inanna, and I wondered, like, do you see Lilith as an aspect of Inanna, or as another name for, like, that the two of them are just in a way one, or how do you, maybe both? How do you, can you say a little more about that?
Lilith was Inanna in Sumerian and Nephtys in Egyptian. Now,
Right.
they say that Inanna's twin was actually a boy called Ibutu or something, or Utu or something like that in Sumerian,
Mm.
but it wasn't. It was Enlil's wife in Sumerian. So Enlil and his wife, I mean, some people say it's Ninmah, but I don't think it is Ninmah. That was Enlil's wife. So I just feel that a lot of the stories that are already out there, they've been taken. I mean, no one really fully understands the Sumerian language because it's very, very ancient. So, and a lot of the interpretations, like, look how many different words we use in different cultures. Look how, you know, even here in England, it's like we might call a fizzy drink here a fizzy drink. Oh, I'm going to go and get a fizzy drink.
Mm.
But then just up the road in the north of England, they'll call it pop,
Mhm.
you know, and it's like, I remember when a guy come over from America to visit a friend of mine, and his aunt was there, and this guy was talking about someone. He went, yeah, he was really pissed. And instantly, my friend's aunt thought that the guy was drunk,
Ah,
because in England, if we say we're pissed, it's because we're drunk,
right, right.
you know. So
Yeah.
I had to explain to her, no, he means like he's pissed off, because we would say pissed off, you know. So
Yeah,
it's, you know, just one little word
yeah.
can change the whole context. And I think this is what's happened, you know, and a lot has been added and a lot has been taken away, because it's what our, you know, the writer normally writes what he can get his own head around,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, stuff like. So you know, I think, and
I
like I said,
also I also
it,
think too, it's the audience, what people are, you know, where people are ready to receive, and like kind of where people are. If you have a message, it has to be, there has to be a thread from where people are to where you're going. And so I think to be able to relate this to things that we know and to things that we think we know is important and good. But I think um for me, I wonder, I mean, they right, the mythology, the common mythology, say that Asclepius had Medusa's blood in him, the healing blood. And so there's a connection between this sort of like feminine serpent, and I'm painting really broad strokes here. I'm not trying to get
no,
specific, but
no,
there's a feminine serpent connection with Ophiuchus, and there's certainly just the whole idea of 13 zodiac constellations and signs does really bring in a feminine element in the lunar. It's a lunar element. It's no longer like a solar calendar. We can look at these correlations.
or how
But
I see
where
it.
do you find the usefulness of it? What is it? Where does it take you? And how? And yeah, would you like to say more
Yeah,
about Ophiuchus, how it all relates?
so when I look at my 13 house chart wheel, the 10th house of Ophiuchus represents Osiris. He was the first, that is actually his house. It's the house of Osiris. But after Osiris died, Isis became ruler of that house. So that's where my partner Eric Seligson stepped in and got all his information was from the Isis era of owning that house. So, you know, that house holds so much energy because it holds the energy of Cyrus, it holds the energy of Isis, it holds the energy of Lilith, but also Nama. the serpent priestess that gave birth to Osiris. And that's Aquarius, who represents Aquarius. So the Aquarian energy that's connected to Ophiuchus is the umbilical cord, because it's mother and son.
Oh.
You know, so there is an umbilical cord between the 13th house of Aquarius and the 10th house of Ophiuchus. That is, you know, we all have that invisible, even if our mother has passed, you know, from this earth, we still have a link to her through the umbilical cord.
Right.
And
and
so that,
to the universe too. We're all connected by some meaningful thread to cosmic consciousness, you know, whether however you visualize that. And I want to take this moment just to say, for people who aren't familiar, that as part of Kim's work, you've developed a house system that is, it's an uneven house system, and you had mentioned it but I want to just kind of reintroduce that idea for people who are like, wait, Ophiuchus in the 10th house or a 13th house. That's and I want to say I love your work. I love your house system as part of the true lifetime sky astrology that you do, but a lot of people watching might be new to that, so I just wanted to kind of refresh. Check out rawstar13.org, right? Go to the website, learn about Kim's work. So yeah, thanks, man. I'll turn it back to you without a question. I think you're good at just following the flow and knowing what to say.
yeah. So I was talking about the 13 house chart wheel that I've had developed, and it's the calculations are actually based on Waterberg's calculations. He's an astronomer, but also an astrologer. But as an astronomer, he's known as Barry Parkinson, but as an astrologer, he's known as Waterberg. He took his grandfather's name because unfortunately you couldn't be
You
an astronomer
couldn't.
and an astrologer, you know.
Oh, how dreadful, how dreadful, right? When
Back
all
then,
of the old astrologers were astronomers and all of the ancient astronomers were astrologers, now it's like a discredit to someone's
that's the
scientific.
separation. And that's been the theme for many, many centuries, is
Ah,
all this separation and segregation,
yeah.
you know. And this is why we, you know, a lot of teachers out there are teaching oneness and oneness in consciousness and stuff like that, to bring unity back to the people, unity back to like astronomy and astrology and
Right.
other traditions out there that are very important to the soul, you know, to
Yeah.
our human spirit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, he's, you know, he was the original founder of 13 Star Sign Astrology, and then I think
Yeah.
Vasilis Metis with the Capricorn Prometheus kind of rebirthed that. So you know, it's fantastic. But anyway, so this astronomy, my astrology wheel is actually based on astronomy, because we are in the age of Pisces still. I know Western astrologers say we're in the age of Aquarius according to their system, but their system's out of date. It's based on a man-made map that unfortunately is becoming more and more irrelevant as time goes on. And so, yeah, my chart will always change. It will always stay the pace with the shifts and the changes that happen with our solar system.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So in your chart wheel, when we enter into the age of Aquarius, your house system would change. Your first house would. Okay, yeah, that's
It will
great.
become.
So it's evolving. It's fluid. I love that you have a system that's as dynamic as the actual skies. That isn't fixed in how some charismatic guy 2,000 years ago with a big hat said things should be, and then we've all just, okay, sir. it's ridiculous, you know. It's it's depressing. So I love your work. I want to say it might sound confusing. It's new. I know you got to try on a new thing. It's like might not feel right at first. It really makes a lot of sense. So.
Good. Yeah. So my house was actually based on ancient mythology as well. Because when I developed the system, obviously I started channeling all this stuff. And you know, that the actual house system is you know, the mythology of the star signs and the planets is all connected to this ancient history that I've just been talking about. So that's why I include the Black Moon Lilith in my astrology reports. And I've been working with her from day one in 13
Mm-hmm.
steps of astrology. And the House of Ophiuchus, you know, that's all about Osiris, Isis, and Aquarius, really, the Aquarian energy. But also Aries represents Anubis, you know, but also the eighth house of Libra, the house of Cancer. They are also connected to Anubis because he actually runs a big chunk of the chart wheel in mythology because he was such a, he actually, like a lot of people, or it's been said that Asclepius represents Ophiuchus or Ophiuchus represents Asclepius.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
common.
I've kind of come to the conclusion that that Asclepius is actually connected to Anubis
Mm-hmm.
because when Ophiuchus dies, because Ophiuchus is the caduceus, he is the his symbol is the caduceus. So the caduceus is the serpent and the Maldecan eagle coming together, and the rod is the spine and all the DNA and all the genetics. That's what it represents. And that is Osiris himself. That is Ophiuchus himself. He is the one who's mixed, the firstborn man, the firstborn human. So Anubis was his firstborn son. So Anubis was given the rod and the snake, the one rod and the snake, and he gave the other half to Horus, his second-born son from Isis. So that's where the rod and the snake, but they actually represent the medical systems because they were both healers, they in their different ways. Like Horus represents the Jesus theory, and Anubis is more the John the Baptist,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So for people that are into the Bible, and that's not for me, I don't intentionally want to blaspheme the Bible or the biblical or religion, but that is, I'm not religious myself, but I am spiritual and I am very open-minded. So even though I'm channeling all this stuff, it's not like I'm not open to change or to new stories or new ways of seeing things, you know. But I really
Yeah,
do think all the
it's
old,
almost like a new way of seeing older stories that it's very refreshing in many ways. I'm still processing it, so I don't think I have anything really good.
well, it's taken me since 2019 to get my own head around it all. And
Yeah.
that's why I haven't really been putting much out there, just bits and pieces, because, you know, I didn't really want to rush into this story. I wanted to take my time and familiarize myself with it. And even though it was resonating with me, I wanted to be clear. And so I've done a little bit of research on the people that I've spoken about today, and it all tallies up to me. I can
Mhm.
see the connections.
Yeah.
So that's why I really want to write it in the book, because then I can give more connections and show more proof, if you like, or as much proof as you can get with these type of stories, because all mythology, none of it's based
Yeah.
on,
Look,
you know.
if it's a story that actually harnesses and captures the power of the stars, then it has that power and people will tell it. And if enough people tell it, it just becomes a mythology. That's, I mean, everybody always had their own stories, and people would tell stories that reinvented like great cultural losses. They would tell a story of that victory, knowing everyone would know it was like a nonsense to historical fact, but they would tell that story because the story was alive. So I want to keep that open attitude about story, and I want to look at story as just a bridge to the stars, to the living universe. And you're here telling a story that's deeply connected to the ancient history of the origin of, geez, let's say how we got here with life on Earth today. So I want to thank you just for bringing that through, and for doing just everything it takes to, all your work, 30, 40 years in the mediumship. It takes a lot of clearing and focusing and interpersonal development to kind of be able to stabilize your mind, just to make sense of the ocean of impression. So I just, from the very bottom to the top, I want to thank you for everything you just said. It's powerful and beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. So again, like Ophiuchus is all about the balancing of the masculine and the feminine, you know, the light and the dark. And, too much dark is not good. Too much light is not good. We need to walk in the path of the shadow.
Yeah.
And we spoke about that, didn't we, recently?
Yeah.
So that path is a narrow path. And that's been said for many traditions, like the path to the true God is a very narrow path.
Yeah. That's interesting. The path of the balance between opposites and all of the extremes that we encounter in life. It's a really beautiful take on Ophiuchus, because in, Scorpio just preceding, we see things often stretched and pulled and sometimes torn and rendered asunder. And then in Ophiuchus, there is sort of the flip side of that polarity, where things are able to come back together. And then as we move past the galactic center, and they sort of emerge in Sagittarius. But I think that's a process we see through that area of the sky. That what you're giving voice to, it's very valuable to me, in that it increases my understanding of that Scorpio Ophiuchus relationship.
Yeah. Well, I say, like the eighth house of Libra. I mean, the eighth house is ruled by Libra. It's the house of balancing. It's the house of weighing up.
Mm-hmm.
So when we enter into the ninth house, I mean, 9 numerologically is endings. Do you know what I mean? And the ninth house of Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, who represents Enlil or Set in Egyptian.
Mm-hmm.
So he is like the one that would investigate. He's the big brother.
Yeah.
And he's the one that will destroy. He's the destroyer as well.
Yeah.
And so he was, like I said, there's a quote from the Bible that says, "For thou art in the gall of bitterness and in the bonds of iniquity." Well, that actually applies to Pluto. That's the Lucifer, or Satan thing that
Right.
that just really come into my head. So for people that understand, I mean, I don't have much understanding of biblical, even though I've tried to read it. It's just too much.
Yeah. I wouldn't claim to be a biblical scholar myself. I think the most interesting thing about the the Sumerian evolution through Sumerian, or any of the root, like Greek or Aramaic or Hebraic, and when you look at the original languages, which Sumerian, I want to say, I think predates all the 3 languages that I just mentioned, the sort of root languages of the Middle East, we think of them. When you look at the English translation of the You look at the English translation of the Bible, you have a lot of stories that where the character in question is God, big G, small o, small d. And then when you go back into the root stories, you do have like oh gosh, like Adonai and El Shaddai and all that, and then it all gets translated as God, the Elohim, which is plural. Elohim in Hebraic is plural, it gets translated as God.
Yeah.
So when you go back to the Sumerian, you can start to see, well, hold on, some of these characters that get that get the God, that get brought into the Bible as God. They're saying stuff like, oh, here, love and light and community and compassion and then other characters, they're saying like, let me I mean, in Sumerian it was, I think, in Leal, who was showing people how to develop alien technology to journey into space, like against the other gods. I think that he was like a trickster. And all this, whether it's like the most virtuous voices from the highest places, or it's just trickster nonsense, it gets it, it gets brought in. You can trace all this back, and some of what God says in the Bible is trickster nonsense, and some of what God says is really great, and it starts to make sense when you start piecing through the language, and you take the roots. And this story in Hebraic even has an older story that it was based on, and that story, it was recorded in Sumerian. And I want to say, not to go
there's been
on.
a lot of misunderstanding with the old text. I think there has been a lot of misunderstanding, because to me, the two gods in the Bible, the all-loving God and the jealous, possessive God, is Enki and Enlil.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's pretty plain. I loved that about Zechariah Sitchin's research. You say what you will about him and his take, and that's to everybody, or you included. You say what you will. I don't want to get into defending or attacking him here. I just thought that it was very interesting, his work.
I mean, a lot of the work, I've enjoyed his work.
Yeah.
It's like with everyone else, there's a lot of stuff you resonate with, but then there might be bits and pieces that you think, I don't actually resonate with that. So, but everyone, it doesn't matter, as long as you're opening doors and opening minds. That is what we're here to do. We're all here to evolutionize our knowledge, our self-power. Knowledge is power.
It is.
At the end of the day, just keeping an open mind and going, that's interesting. I don't resonate with that. Maybe not right now, but maybe further down the road, I may resonate with that. So
right. Or even if people aren't resonating with the very story that you're presenting here, I hope that it comes through vividly that there are other stories, other versions of the story of how we got here, that put us on different trajectories, give us different momentums, give us different options of thinking about the future and where we're going. And I want people to think about why and how stories get changed through time. Is it as easy as the victors writing the history, or are there institutional, how do you say, conspiracies to suppress and oppress women and other groups? Thinking about this, there's value just in
it's a combination of all those
all
things.
of it. Oh, you said it.
And so it's just a combination of all those things. And I think, like with all this, it becomes a settled science. It's really where we don't want to go. Nothing is settled until it becomes fact.
Right. The scientific method is a method of investigation and manifesting curiosity into knowledge, right? And so when we think of science as like, oh, because science said it's stuck, that's not what science never said it's stuck. Science says fuck around and find out. doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I geez, on that note, I almost want to start to wind it down. Let me check the time. We are going on about a good hour. Do you have anything you'd like to really get in, and like closing thoughts or anything to wrap it up?
No, I'm just happy to be able to relay what I've relayed today. I mean, I know thank you. There's a lot of people out there that have been interested. So that is just really, it's just a small piece out
Yeah.
of like a ton of information that I'm holding on to at the moment.
All right. Yeah.
So yeah, I just really do hope many of you do resonate with it, or at least keep an open mind about it. And yeah, I'm just thankful to be able to get some of it out there anyway.
Yeah, quite so. I think there's a great sense out there, certainly a shared sense that I've had with other people that I've talked to. And the sense is that there's throughout all the cultures on earth and all the different lenses you can look at divinity through and all the different pantheons, were they talking about planets? Were they talking about forces? Are these like people in a god realm? Is there any map that makes sense? And if there is a map that makes sense, it's likely that there are kind of these characters associated with our evolution, life on earth, which that'd be down here. The characters are up here that we're down there. And as seems to be how deities relate to ordinary people. And it seems like maybe through different cultural lenses from down here, we could have perceived them in all kind of ways. So I think a lot of us are trying to reclaim our story. We're trying to reclaim our self-knowledge and what we know in our genes and our bones and our souls.
In a way that makes sense, in a way that's simplified and makes sense. And that's what I've been trying to do with my research on ancient history, is to simplify it and make it make sense.
Yeah.
So that is what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah, well, beautifully done. And I do you have a plan for your book? Is it
No, I mean, I trust in universal timing, and
just
every time I've tried to get my head into it, I've been distracted, and I think there will be a right time. And for me to do this video today, I really do feel that time is very near,
that's
you know.
beautiful.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it, and I can't wait to get the information out there, to be honest. But I just, I've got my own personal life, so this to me is my passion. So yeah, I just wish I could live out my passion 24/7.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, in a brighter world, I think we all could. But for now, Kim, I want to close the dialogue. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and sharing this with the people.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much for listening, and as always, sending you peace.
Yeah, peace and blessings. Peace and
Take care.
blessings, everybody. All right. Well, goodbye for now.